First of all, I just want to thank everyone for really being here on a Friday. Thank you for taking the time. Um, I promise you a fun and engaging discussion because returns can be really fun. I actually think that the world of returns deserves its own TV show. And I want to give you a suggestion. Anytime you're bored or anytime you have extra time, or it can be a family activity, go and research some of the reasons why people return stuff. Just go and see what retailers have to dealt with. So just before this call, I did a quick research, and I have three examples for you. First one is use camp toilet shipped online. The second one is a puppy in a box. Thank God they cut it on time. And the third one was have a carpet for half a refund. And this is just scratching the surface. So I encourage you all. It's a fun activity you can do. But beyond that, returns is a really hot topic right now for a good reason. Actually, 740 or 60 billion dollars over reasons just in the US. So that's for last year. That's how much return cost last year. And almost half of that, it's online or omni returns. And I actually have a really good slide that I can share with you quickly. And we can talk about why returns are important and why do we have this conversation. So, as you can see, almost 26%, actually exactly 26.3% of all returns were online or omni returns. This is including buy online, return in store. That's around $370 billion. There are also some of this, it's also returns and claims and appeasements. Also, what I found interesting is that around 11 and 30% of all online returns are fraudulent. And this next statistics really blew my mind. So 50% of all returns in store are Boris. So bought online, return in stores. So it's a really huge number. But what that means is that think about it, how many people just returns brought in back to stores. So this is important because we can talk about returns as an issue, but also returns as an opportunity. And the last one is really the cost of handling return. It's between 17 and 30% of the purchase cost and accounts for everything, handling, shipping, transportation costs, and everything together. But it's not just the numbers. It's really about the customer experience, the raising customer expectations. So returns are not just an issue, but it's part of the whole journey of the customers. And it's really crucial for returns to get it right. And the reason why we have this conversation today, and the reason why I'm going to introduce three amazing panelists to you guys, and most of you know them by now because they're really leaders in our field. But it's really important to get it right because it affects the bottom line. It affects the lifetime value of a customer. With that being said, I just want to give each of the panelists some time to introduce themselves. And these are their pictures, but I'll stop share now so you guys can go and take the spotlight.
I guess I'll start since I'm first on the left. So Adam Kelly, awesome to meet everybody. I realized when Darko put that together that my picture on LinkedIn was very outdated. So I updated that last night. So appreciate that, Darko. So I love the OMS space. I've got a lot of folks on here that I've worked with, I've worked for, and then Zach and I worked together, Darko and I worked together. A lot of the folks on the call, heck, taught me what OMS meant. So a lot of respect for this group and excited to be a part of it today. And currently I work for Körber Supply Chain Software, which is order management and a supply chain solutions warehouse advantage provider.
Thanks, Adam. Zach?
Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I will go next. Good to see everyone. A lot of familiar faces. If we haven't met already, my name is Zach Zalowitz. I lead order management here at Perficient. And I just came from industry. I was at Foot Locker before this, leading digital tech, digital product experience at the intersection of where digital and physical meet at the store. So a lot of the experience design, and I was in industry right before this, and 14 years before that, I was 8 at Manhattan Associates, another 3 doing a little bit of Aptos and IBM work, consultatively and I ran product management at what's now Körber. So I actually worked with Darko and Adam and a few others here, and decided I wanted to go to the dark side, Darko, on the retailer side, and took my medicine and came back into OM consulting. So, but it's really great to be here with everyone, and just looking forward to the engagement.
Thanks, Zach. Chap?
Yes, so I just want to say I'm happy to be on the other side of this discussion for the first time. This is I think our 11th OMG panel. And I am the OMG host usually, so you can see my lovely shirt here that I wore for today. I know you're all jealous. Yes, they're available for sale. We'll put them up online, and just don't return it, would be all I ask. So anyway, been in industry and retail for most of my career, in the last few years at Nextuple in product strategy, and of course running this great OMG group, and excited to jump into the conversation. And Darko, thank you to you for hosting this. Darko hosted a panel, one of our first panels, and actually I think we only had, maybe 15, 20 people. I can see already we've got 56 people on this panel. So we've grown quite a bit over the last year, and I wanted to just give kudos to Darko for being part of that, and folks like Zach that have been along the journey the whole way. So let's go.
Thanks, Chap. You know what? We quite often don't realize that the space that we're passionate about, which is the order management space, is not that big of a space. So I'm really glad we have this support group here where we can talk about things that we're passionate, because every time I try to talk to my family, my friends about order management or returns, people look at me like what's wrong with you? So I want to share another fun slide. And I'm going to start with Zach. So Zach, based on your experience, how would you describe the role of OMS in the return process? Is OMS primarily responsible for managing returns within the, reverse logistics space? Or is it also playing a significant role in reducing or preventing returns today in this modern world?
In the modern world of the now evolved order management system. So I think order management enters in much sooner in the conversation than it did, let's say 5 to 10 years ago, in terms of avoidance, for sure. So I'll touch on that in a second. I think the role of inducting a return and approving it, you've seen these outside systems be able to start a returns process, but the back end of that is definitely an OMS in terms of creating an RMA. And then where I think OMS is getting leveraged more, and there's some niche players here as well outside of OM, is how do you disposition inventory back into the network? So does that Boris return go back into the store, or is it an online only SKU that you're going to have a hard time fulfilling in later? And then how does the other omni-channel flows within an OMS kick in and help alleviate that inventory, for example? So I think its role is advanced more and more through not just trying to avoid a return to begin with, but how do you then take a return, authorize it, disposition it back in accurately, and then reactivate that inventory? I think the OM's taken over more and more of that conversation. I'll tell you, probably in the last 3 to 5 years specifically. That's the short answer. But it's definitely evolved as the technologies themselves have gotten to a more microservices place. You're able to kind of provide niche spot value much easier than you were, let's say, 10 years ago when there were only a few kind of key players in the market.
And 10 years ago, there was no issues with returns. I'm joking.
Yeah. Well, it's a growing problem in that sense.
Problem.
So, yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Adam, Chap, do you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I do. I think to your point around 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, there wasn't a very good integration between online and in-store, right? And so if a customer took an online purchase and tried to return it in store, the CSR at the store would just throw their hands up and be like, I don't know what to do with this, right? And so you start to talk about the cost and start to talk about all the impact there. But I think, this is not a conversation about, hey, we should have better romance copy, we should have more 360 spins, we should have prettier picture with sharper images, right? That's the e-com side of the house. And they're all really good reasons to go attack that to prevent returns. But I think in addition, there's so many different use cases for why the customer needs the purchase. But I think inventory, and more importantly, ETA, if somebody needs something this weekend and you can tell them, that, hey, yes, it's going to get there or it's not going to get there, it may cost you a sale, but it'll prevent a return. And same thing with the communication side of it, the Wizmo piece. It's like, if the better that the OMS can help to inform the customer of expectations and set those expectations outside of product images and such, you're less likely to get a return. And I think, on the other side of your question there around, just really the reverse logistics part, it depends on what type of retailer you are. If you're a retailer with a lot of stores, there's probably already a pretty strong return policy system that you have built and you have in place, right? I don't know that OMS should come in and try to build another one on top of it, right? How do we integrate into the one that you have? But I think that's, to Zach's point, that's one that's really starting to proliferate across is, all right, I can't just take back this return because, is there a date? Is the lot controlled? Is it serialized? What am I going to do? What's the disposition of it? There's all kinds of factors and rules that need to come into play to decide whether or not that return is eligible, and those got to live somewhere, right? So I think there's a lot of places that we're stepping into from the OMS space that we weren't in 5 or 10 years ago.
Adam, I just want to quickly say for the folks who don't know, Wizmo is where's my order.
Right.
So we
really all do, but yes, you're right. Thank you.
No problem. Go ahead, Chap.
I was going to say, I think the time has come that OMS should play a larger role in prevention. And if you think about returns data, it's kind of the dirty secret that the retailer does not want to share with the consumer. But what about using that data to actually shape fulfillment options or drive incentives for purchasing? So, for example, if you know that the damage rate is extremely high on shipping for an item, why not incent BOPUS for that, right? That would be an example of driving purchase behavior. I'm getting some background noise here. If someone could, is that me that's echoing, or is that, yeah, there we go. Thank you. So I think there's all this data that folks have around why things are getting returned, and that could be used to actually influencing the purchase process, to include, you may have a return cost that, return charges on items that are returned more, right? Instead of just having a flat return policy that says returns are free or returns cost X, why not make that dynamic based on the actual item that a customer is purchasing and the, propensity for that item to be returned? So I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that retailers could bring in to enhance and shape the purchasing, which would then mitigate those returns.
Thanks, Chap. So just to continue, I want to pick your brain on this, because that was a really good point about using data. But can you specifically tell me what has changed in the past 5-10 years? How have OMS evolved for the past 10 years, let's say, to be in a position to use more data now to better support returns?
Yeah, I think the data has been there all along. I think there's been a fear of using that data to drive purchasing decisions or making return policy that's not just generic. I think we need to evolve from, or evolve to, personalized purchasing. So driving fulfillment decisions based on who is the consumer. Maybe that consumer's shop done 100% BOPUS, and so that's the default option that you present that customer. Mm-hmm. So I think that the data around the consumer behavior, around product returns data, et cetera, has been there. I think that data is probably becoming more generally available because people have a better handle on that data. But I don't think that people have taken the next step and really started to use that data. And so, that be my perspective is I don't think much has changed in the landscape. I just think that people haven't taken the step to say, I really want to proactively use this data to guide, returns behavior online. I think the biggest thing that's changed from a landscape perspective is we've got, retail has created its own problem by incenting the returns behavior, right? If free returns, if return bracketing, all of those things are now frankly encouraged, which just drives this return behavior. And I think it's time to take a step back and say, you know what, you should put some time and thought into this decision. And if you want to return it, that might cost you some money if you choose to mail it to us, et cetera. And I think retail is actually part of the problem, that we've created this return behavior and that's risen to the level that it has risen.
And Darko, I think you didn't see a lot of companies have omni-channel ops teams pre-COVID or a little bit before COVID because they hadn't really merged omni-channel. They were just operating in different channels, and there was a crosscut, and BOPIS was that crosscut, so the early adopters. So now you have all these omni ops team. They're charged with all the metrics of forward and now reverse logistics, and it quit being just a cost center. And they got a little bit smarter that it was actually a loyalty lever. And so they started putting a little bit more attention to saying, well, why do I have all these problems? Well, it turns out, in Chap's example, and this was true at Foot Locker a little bit, your fulfillment for logistics problems sometimes are causing the reverse logistics. So the Omni Ops team started to get kind of a little bit smarter about kind of connecting those two dots. And then they said, well, then how do I go solve this? So, okay, there's an API for that. Okay, so, I can build a new screen. Hey, I can put a little bit more logic in. So I think that evolution's what's changed the year and a half before COVID. And definitely now that COVID made everyone jump into more Omni flow, ship from and pick up in curbside. That is what's kind of coalesced the software side to say, well, maybe I actually need to build these capabilities because now the market actually has needed them now for a while, not forward-looking product need, right? So I think that's all coalesced in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think you're right, Chap. The data's been there forever. Right? We just haven't been able to use it right. And I don't think, Zach, to your point, we haven't been collaborating across departments, right? I mean, I still know retailers that have online merchants and in-store merchants, right? Completely different groups. I mean, and these are big companies, big, very, very big companies. So I think, when you think about a return, right? The supply chain is impacted, store ops is impacted, the merchants are impacted. I mean, everybody in the finance is obviously impacted. Everybody in the organization is impacted until they all sit at the table together and you form that omni-channel type organization. You're gonna miss some of that low-hanging fruit. So I think it's important to get alignment within the organization to be able to execute better, make better decisions.
I agree with all of you guys. Personally, I think we are overusing the word omni-channel. Omni-channel is just table stakes now. I mean, like, what do you mean you don't have it? That's the way business should work today. And if you don't have it, you're at a disadvantage. And if you have it, it's not a competitive advantage for you to have BOPIS and ROPIS and ship from store. I want to go back to what Chap said about how, bracketing. So I personally believe that's outside of our control. I think as an industry, we have encouraged the consumer. They got used to it. I see how my sister shops. My sister buys 10 items and keeps only 2. And that's the new normal for her. And I don't know if she's going to change her behavior unless retailers step in and start charging for returns. But it's such a dangerous game because now this newer generation, they got used to it. And if you want to take that away, that can impact bottom line, customer loyalty, and similar. So that's out of our control. I'm not going to ask, but for example, Adam, where do you think we can make the most difference as OMS?
So I think, to that point, Darko, right? I think and this may not be a popular opinion, but right, this Amazon effect has really that's it's kind of led to all of this, right? Oh, heck, it's super easy. What Amazon probably has 500 engineers and $5 billion to go off and do this and make it however the heck they want to. And as the retailer, you don't. I think what's important for retailers, what are their KPIs, right? I'll tell you what the industry KPIs are and try to help you in that journey, but what are your KPIs? What are important to you? And I think that's where that plays, because to your point, right? Maybe there's a different workflow for a true loyalty customer if there's a loyalty program versus a first-time shopper, right? And I think you can still stay sticky with the customer if you had a different policy versus if it's just a first-time customer saw a deal on Brad's deals and went off and bought a whole bunch of stuff with the intent of returning half of it. Because everybody's a little bit different, right? It's a different use case for a refrigerator versus a pair of shoes. And all the folks on this call and all the different industries they're in, it's going to be different. So
would it matter to offer consumers different options, return online, return in store, do an exchange, uneven exchange, keep your return? Like we have seen those grow so much.
Right.
So is that part of the solution?
Yeah, I think so. To your point around keep the return. So I bought something from Temu. All right, whether or not I should have, I did. And
we're gonna talk about that.
And so it broke within 5 minutes, and it wasn't one of the $2 items. It was like a $30 item. So I went online. They said take a picture of it. I took a picture of it, and they said, okay, here's a $30 credit, or I'll give you $25 in a gift card, whatever. So yes, I mean, the returns journey, and maybe I don't even get to the RMA, right? Maybe I take advantage of that and don't even get to the RMA. So, but again, every company is a little bit different in the expectations.
Yeah. Go ahead, Zach.
The lowest hanging fruit on the specific returns problem, or the broader picture, Darko? Bracketing alone conversation, or a broader sense? What do you? Two different answers potentially.
Yes, I want to remove bracketing completely from the conversation because I don't think anything we can do about it. So my question was more about return have happened.
Yeah.
What is the best thing we can do? And that was more, the question was around what are some of the, is it providing customers option to process the return better or worse? Are we encouraging more returns, or are we part of the problem, or are we just offering a better solution?
Yeah, here's the simple viewpoint. You're going to have returns. You can knock them down from 20 to 15% or 15 to 10. And so you get some gain there. So you return less. Great. You still have to solve for the operational challenge of returning something. And so I think the lowest hanging fruit is a general OM problem, opportunity missed, which is a lot of the engines now versus a heuristics engine 10 years ago. A lot of these engines now have algorithms on an AI around price disposition, stock disposition, markdown, cadence, pre-markdown, and such, that are not fully being factored into the sourcing decision. So why that's a problem for returns is when you take a product that was shipped from a DC and you put it into a store close to a customer that it was maybe out of season or not likely to get hit, you're more likely to mark that product down in retail flow. And so understanding that inventory came from a return and it's kind of unnaturally in a store against an inventory plan that it shouldn't be. And then having the OMS kick in and skip the DC for the next demand that comes in and say, go to that store and get that out of that store so it doesn't sit there and potentially get marked down. I don't think the industry looks enough at that. So I think that's the general missed opportunity at the intersection of returns. Is like, to Chap's point, like the data's been there. Go analyze this and say, you know what, maybe 5 of that 10 or 15% is this scenario where my inventory is just stale. And so generally solve for that opportunity, because all the engines have them now. But it's like a double-edged sword at the same time, right? the more advanced you get in the sourcing strategy, maybe the less clear you are why you made a decision. And so that's a whole separate webinar, right? But like, I think that's the lowest hanging fruit. We're still stuck with, a lot of companies have bought up a Porsche sourcing engine and drive that car to the end of their driveway and back down to get the mail with it. Like they don't like really aren't getting the full leverage of what they've bought, yet they're paying a high premium in some cases, some vendors out there for a very expensive car that you just aren't driving like you should be driving it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Zach, that's an awesome point on the sourcing effectiveness. And to that, just when you think about if you are a retailer that has 20% of demand, you would think about, okay, 20% of my outbound demand is going to get returned, yet no one puts any thought into a reverse logistics network strategy. So how is that predominantly coming in? Where is it predominantly coming from? And should I maybe design my network or create different return paths based on the actual, traffic patterns of my returns? I mean, it's someone said, I don't have any real strategy for 20% of my shipping volume. It's like, what?
Yeah.
So I think that's a missed opportunity. Going back to the question though, about like, well, how do you, one of the comments was like, I think tightening return rules will have a direct impact on conversion. I think, yes, if you create only one option, I think you've got to create multiple options for that return to occur. Some may and encourage the ones that you want and penalize the ones that you don't want, but give the customer options. Then I think you're gonna, you have less of an impact on conversion. Yes, it would be hard to just say, I'm going from free shipping to 100% charging for shipping.
Right.
That probably will have an impact on conversion, but creating options, multiple pickup locations, multiple pickup methods, multiple cost structures for those returns, I think mitigates that a little bit. But I think it is around the network side. That's where OMS can play the most role, is better routing of those returns. And so,
Yeah.
Thanks, Chap. Can I ask for a because you're on that side of the aisle, like for a specific example? Have you ever faced like a specific issue or challenge, and how have you dealt with it?
Just in returns in general?
In returns in general.
Yeah, I would say I want to comment on the trend around advanced returns. So, you print a label or you drop it in the UPS box and all of a sudden you've got your money back, or you've got credit with that retailer. I think that needs to be used in a more precise manner, depending on the use case. So when I was at Red Wing Shoe, for example, we sold safety footwear that was required to be on the job. And if someone bought one and it didn't fit, like, they probably need a new pair of shoes really fast for the job. And so that was a use case where I could get my head around giving someone their money back quickly. But if it's a casual purchase that, you're buying, a piece of clothing or something, and there's no immediate need for that purchase, maybe you don't do an advanced return. We found there is a lot of, you show the fraud stats, the advanced return just invites even more of that behavior. And then frankly, you've got people how many people here on this call have boxed something up and then it's in their basement 3 weeks later, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot to return that. I got my money back, so I didn't care. Right. So I think that's a use case that people have jumped on because it's a customer wow, but I think it needs to be used more judiciously.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the data point as well. It's data outside of OMS, but how much does it, it's the difference between self-service and customer service. You can give them the easy API way with self-service. But if you're getting, 20% back, 20% of your returns back are fraudulent, or the rocks in the box instead of, the product, how much does that customer service agent cost, and how much does that return really cost? And trying to find a balance, right? To Zach's point, the returns aren't going away, right? They're always going to be there. And Darko, we've made them easier to do. but do we make them easy, or do we?
Can
is
I?
there supposed to be friction in the?
I'm gonna throw you a curveball here. What if government steps in with, because from a sustainability standpoint, because we have seen lately, for example, the state of Colorado, the state of Minnesota, they have introduced delivery fees. What if the government says, hey, we're polluting too much the environment, let's do a return fee? Something like that could possibly happen. Do you think that could impact customer behavior?
Absolutely. And that's what I've been advocating for is I think we need to, it's ironic that retailers have their, on the product detail page, how sustainable their product is, yet they offer free returns. I mean, they're mixed messages, right? We're promoting someone mailing something back, something getting shipped twice. But yet we're touting the fact that this was made with, green materials.
Topically, sustainability in Ford Logistics has been hard enough to get adoption on across the industry. The bigger enterprise companies have taken more to it. So you can see CO2 footprint on Ford Logistics. I don't even think the Ford Logistics conversation has really gotten sustainability in mind yet. So the reverse side of it is years from now.
Miles away.
Yes. Miles away. Yeah, potentially. I mean, I'd be interested to see the government mandate charging. I think the government has a role in penalizing the company, and the company can choose what their policy is on whether they pass that charge to. But not to comment on anything more than systems. But I'm just saying it's like the experience, to Chap's point earlier, needs to be option based to the consumer, but behind the scenes, what label they get, whether that goes to a store, to the DC, or they get to keep it, I think whether that's OM logic or a niche provider, I think that's still up in the air a little bit. That the decisioning, the reverse disposition logic on where it goes, that's I'm not sure any one OM has risen to say that we're great there, right? I think you see that get customized a lot, for example, versus just buying another COTS solution to go do it.
There is, but I think there's always a cause and effect, right? So Chap, to your point, right, around sustainability. Well, let's change our network strategy and let's put those return locations as stores, and let's put them closer to the customer so there's not as much transportation cost back to a centralized DC. But then the store operation team is going to get mad at you because now you've got non-planogrammed inventory just laying around, and to your point, Zach, then you need to go back in and look at allocation and come after it. And there's just a lot of decisions that are in play there across many stakeholders that need to be involved to make it optimal for your organization.
Yeah.
I don't want to open a can of worms now. Maybe we're gonna have a separate section for this, but resale as a platform, it's also getting really big, and we can see how this tie into returns.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be a return. Why not have retailers have that as a return option, right? You could return this to us, or guess what? Here's our resale partner, listed on their those are some up and coming options that I think retailers could be thinking about for sure.
Trove, if I'm remembering, is that what Trove?
Yeah, Trove.
Yeah.
Yep. Trove's a big one. Yeah.
But I think that brings up another point around, all these niche return organizations like Happy Returns and Returnly. Like, let's use that as an example, right? Here's a big giant BNPL company called Affirm that went and bought Returnly to make the experience amazing, and then they turned around 2 years later and got rid of it because they're like, oh crap, returns is hard. So I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Not at all. It's one of the most difficult spaces, and that's why we're having this discussion, because it's very difficult to actually put where does the OMS experience within return lives. And we may disagree to what extent, like I would also argue here that communication is very important post-purchase, and I know Zach has been all over that place. I think that's a great way of reducing returns, and OMS can play a huge role here.
Right.
I do want to take a quick break from this because we have a question from the audience, and Nagarash, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but he's asking. I think tightening the return rules will have a direct impact on the conversion rates. Your thoughts on how to achieve the sweet spot between setting the right return rules with no minimal impact to shopper experience and conversion rates? It's a great question. We touched a little bit on it, but who would like to take the lead on that one?
Oh, I'll answer first if you want. Hey, Sai. So from a digital product experience Foot Locker standpoint, on the product display page, you have to put some pill form or something that says, you know, free returns up to X days. So your policy has got to be made up front. So the conversion knock potentially is reinforcing that from the PDP into cart and checkout. So that's the forward part where they have to know that when they buy from you, you have to tell them it's free. Some of the brands at Foot Locker, even still, there's a multi-brand companies, the policies aren't the same. Some charge for returns, some didn't. We were trying to think through that at Foot. Now, great. Now, separate from that, you realize that shoe doesn't fit, literally, right? So then what are my options to return? Well, everyone's trying to mimic what Amazon does. So it's this kind of reverse conversion. It's not a conversion conversation. It's actually an NPS conversation, and it's a CSAT conversation around how frictionless was it to go click, click, click and go through. So like happy returns is what we used at Foot, for example. So, okay, what are my options? Well, I can charge you. You can send it back to UPS like Amazon, or you can take it back to a store. But I think the big miss is also then, well, when am I going to get that credit? Can I just go ahead and purchase something else? You ship it to me and I give it back to you when you give me delivery. So I don't think anyone has like clarity on that part. I think to your question, like that sweet spot depends on whether you're selling shoes or keyboards and mouses or the Temu $30 thing Adam mentioned. Is like it really changes the conversation around what the experience looks like, because not all products are created equal. Or automotive aftermarket, same, you know, you need that product to fit your car to work. So maybe you need a Ford Exchange without receipt expected yet. All of that needs to get served up in a really clean, crisp CX layer. And I think there's big disconnects between digital product teams and people that actually understand OM API and enablement and logic, right? That's where I think the breakdown in the CX happens, is the CX journey people aren't fully aware of what is possible from a capability perspective. It's just, I don't know, that was a long answer, but it's a faceted conversation.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, Zach. I mean, completely understand your point and where you're coming from. So one of the major challenge, at least I have experience from being part of various implementations, is like in this omni world, especially the e-com order, when I'm trying to place an order online, I just get onto website, look in a few things, and I always have the flexibility of going into other websites and running a quick comparison and to see who is offering me the best value for money even before I go and hit the checkout button, right?
Yeah.
So now in that rat race, I know a lot of retailers think about or mainly focus on the conversion, saying that my first job is to get the order, get the money. Yeah. Let me worry about the returns or the money I'm going to lose through the returns at a later point, right? So people are so caught up in looking at the conversion rates. Once they start seeing those big numbers, yes, they're happy to an extent, but eventually, once the reality hits, the return starts shooting up. I think that's where they slowly start realizing that, yeah, we definitely have to look at this holistically rather than just looking at the website or the conversion rates and kind of like fine tune our rules and policies accordingly.
Absolutely.
Great point. But it's usually two different teams that are looking at it, and that's one of the main
problems.
There you go, Darko. Well said. Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Sai. Great question.
Thank you.
So guys, just because for sake of time, we talked about the issues. We talked about where did it came from. We talked about you know, what can we impact and what we cannot. How about what's on the roadmap? What's coming? What are some of the newer technologies that, you know, can contribute to this space? And here by newer technology, I'm thinking AI, I'm thinking blockchain, even if you want to go as far as quantum computing, I don't know. But who would like to take the lead on that?
For it,
AI
I
is going
can
to solve
start.
it all.
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
go ahead, Adam.
No, I just said AI is going to solve it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
AI.
I think the interesting thing here, going back to can we start to move towards every single transaction is unique. It's a unique consumer, it's a unique product for there's a use case that they're using it for. And so build the fulfillment and returns experience based on the data that you have for that purchaser. If someone on your site is a habitual returner, then the return policy should be different for them. I think that's if retailers really want to start to dial in the cost to serve and the cost to return, they've got to think about bringing more specific data in to inform that purchase and that return. I think that's a huge, and AI of course can inform that. On the outbound side, you can leverage AI to, as Zach was describing earlier, bring in all kinds of data to inform a sourcing decision, but you can bring that same data in to inform the purchase decision. I might discount the purchase to drive BOPUS. I might not allow returns on the item at all because it has a high damage rate for some reason. And until I understand the root cause of that damage rate, I'm not allowing ship to home, for example. Those are some things where I think that we can use data to automatically provide offers or reduce choice or increase choice based on the who and the what and the where.
Wow, interesting. Like part of loyalty, part of their customer profile. This is a serious returner. Let's limit return policy to either dollar amount or units per. I hadn't thought of that.
When I was at Best Buy leading the fraud team shared the fraud data with the returns team, right? And then that was a that was a close. Those two groups, returners and fraudsters, were typically shared pools of people, and so you could share that data across to restrict purchasing or limit returns, etc.
Yeah,
great point. I just think of the bad players would just create a new email, a new profile, but probably AI can help with that too.
Absolutely.
So be a little bit of a bombshell, Darko. So I think the OM market is fragmenting right now. I think 15 years ago, you had one of two options, really one or two. I think there are so many more players and so many more options from a services-based perspective that the box has gotten even grayer. And I think where that OM somewhat gray box is going to start to meet is actually merch planning and inventory planning solutions. You're going to kind of see a much more connective tissue between an OM and a planning solution, an inventory balancing solution that intersects returns. I think if you connect those two more fully, I think where the OM market's going is this omnipotent oversight engine that is constantly keeping the returns piece in balance with the fulfillment metrics, with the fraud aspect, with the merch plan. And you start to have this Skynet sort of deal. It's not pie in the sky anymore, which is scary. It is a 5 to 10 or 20 person Omni ops team is kind of like potentially needs to kind of retool or re-educate themselves, because the OM is going to get smart enough in the next 5 to 10 years, I guarantee you, where it is actually figuring out all of these interconnected things together, everything Chap and Adam were talking about. And that's scary interesting to think about. And Adam was kind of half joking, but understanding predictively when those scenarios are going to happen and getting in front of them before they actually become an issue puts OM historically from a reactive system, fix the sourcing against a bad inventory plan, and you start to see OM's role holistically be proactive. And so back to returns, it's like you're going to shut that store off that keeps misshipping stuff or sending 2 left shoes in a box instead of a left and a right. And it's going to cut that capacity down, or it's going to over buffer that inventory, and the system just self-balances.
Mhm.
I think that's where we're going. And I think it's going to solve it in its own right. It will solve a returns problem at the intersection of store ops, returns, fraud, supply chain, merch planning, customer care. It's going to be, like I said, scary, interesting where that
Zach,
goes.
you can't just say that end of the panel discussion. We need like an hour and a half for it. So
It's your next webinar, buddy.
next webinar. Okay, that's fair.
It's evolved. It is starting to evolve to that place already.
I can see that.
Yeah.
It's a really fun conversation to have. Adam, do you wanna jump on this?
So
But-
I think Zach, to your point, I mean, part of it's execution, right? To your point, how do you prevent returns? Get the stuff to the customer, right? And when you've got all these new nodes that you've lit up, and they're shipping stuff to customers, and they may or may not be doing their job, right? And we're using data. So Matt Sears is on the phone. I mean, we had every scenario under the sun. Like, we're giving a store 3 hours to get the product out the door, and if they don't, I'm stealing it back and I'm taking it to the next most optimal node, because I can't afford to lose a sale or get a return because that store didn't execute. And again, you've got that data, you understand that. So I think,
Yep.
Zach, I think execution is a big piece of that, to your point, and you're exactly right.
I got it too late. Forget misshipment. It arrived a day after you said it was going to.
Exactly.
So I don't need it anymore, so take it back.
Yep.
And so it's sitting dead, stale inventory. So ding that store's aptitude to fill an order and bump it down in the sourcing. So it's this holistic conversation, Darko. It's not just the returns piece, but that is why OM's role has to be in the mix of all it, because it houses all the other information for the ripple effect of what returns is and where the cause of it to begin with. Chap, what do you think?
I was going to add on to that. We were working with a retailer. I won't name them, but they were using the returns volume in their inventory planning forecasting.
Yes.
So they were expecting certain SKUs at certain rates to come back into inventory, and they were using that in their available to promise.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's just an example of where you're, as you're describing how interconnected the role of OMS can play. But there are already people starting to experiment with those kinds of things and leveraging that kind of data. I thought that was pretty interesting.
You'll see that company I think I know what you're talking about, has really great earnings quarter over quarter, because their operational control, they're controlling margin and cost by like investing in tech upfront, right? So it's like this, like, it's not a cost center anymore. Returns isn't cost center alone anymore. It's like, to Chap's point, it's like, oh, I'm sitting on this and I'm sitting on this. Like, I haven't put 2 and 2 together. Like, right, why would the store reorder something if I know it's highly likely that return's going to come back? And that's the 1 unit they needed anyway. And the disposition was positive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, Chap, to your point, I think it's an interconnected conversation that when you invest in that, you actually see it on earning, or not everyone's public, but.
So who's doing the dispositioning in that scenario? Is it the store employee? Like, it comes to the store versus sending it back directly to the DC. The employee do the inspection and they can decide if this is going to the customer on the shelf or back to the DC. So like an additional step. I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. So that I would argue that will cost the store some dollars.
Well, in my example, there was actually no store network of consequence involved. But it's certainly, I think, like we were saying, Zach, earlier, you're saying that the omni-channel team kind of coalesced to become an end-to-end team. I still think returns is organizationally not as integrated as it needs to be. I know some organizations haven't invested in a returns capability that kind of oversees all return activity. And that's a good first step organizationally, is to have at least a domain ownership of returns. But I still think the omni-channel organization and the returns organization could do better sharing data, which would start to enable some of the things that we're talking about here today. But I think most retailers are not there.
Yeah.
Hey,
Körber,
guys.
you're in product, right? At Gap.
Yes. Yes.
Do you have so not to put you on the spot,
No,
do you have a
no.
named role of digital product owner of returns, or are
We
they
do.
just-
We do.
Okay.
And they work very closely with OMS, with business, with planning. We're very good at Gap managing returns, like very proud of that team.
You have a ton of brands and a ton of SKUs. A
Yes.
single brands, more limited SKUs. So to Chap's point, how big of a problem it is and how much of your human capital you put into it to kind of identify problem sets. I don't think we're at a point where the tech's the problem. There's either
That's
an
true.
OM or outside. It is like, okay, I'm actually going to put someone on this problem because it's big enough to solve.
We have a SWAT team at Gap. We have a team that is comprised from all brands representative, product people, marketing people, ops people, contact center people.
Yeah.
And that's a whole team, and that's why it's so good.
Yeah. Because you need it.
Right? I am very sorry. I know we have 3 minutes left. I want to ask a questions from Isabel from the audience. Used to work at Return Go and recently switched over to Hyper, same day delivery. Curious to know more about the connection between returns and same day delivery and what that looks like for the consumer. Any insights appreciated.
Okay, the customers don't want to pay for this. We looked into this at Foot. If I'm going to same day deliver to you the exchange and come back and pick the return up, and that was free, I would do that all day. It's not. And there's a cost implied, and the retailers don't want to eat the cost of that. So until that becomes more true, that it's a palatable, it's called $2.99. I don't know what anyone thinks is good value, but if it was $3 for me to get it like within the same day and give you back the return and not have to go to UPS, and it was even exchange or not, it doesn't matter. That I think that would need to be, if Isabel, if I'm understanding your question, the CX design like that would have to be at a palatable charge, or free. If it's like an expensive item, I would expect it to be free. But I mean, it's not there yet. We're some years away from last mile intersecting reverse last mile. Still, I think it's not going to be adopted widely until a Gap, a Dick's Sporting Goods, a Target, a Foot Locker. You're going to need to see a big enterprise company go there, Tractor Supply, these types of Best Buy, Chap. These sorts of companies are going to spend a lot of money and time and learnings, and they're going to go on stage at NRF, and then everyone's going to hear about it. And then years later, you're going to see the ripple into tier 2. But I think we're some time away from that to get.
And also, just because drone delivery, I know we don't have time. It's a whole hour, but okay, guys, I think we're right on time. I have a quick call out for Chap. Chap, can you please share with the group where can we purchase the t-shirts? Also, we would expect an extended return policy and a discount coupon code. Like,
I will see what I can do. I'll have to talk to my marketing team who produced this shirt in the first place, and we'll see if we can make a link available for purchase. It's flattering that you would want one. So awesome.
Hey, Chap, it's cash up front.
Cash up front. Yes.
Hey, some of the Asian markets we are exploring cash on delivery, so that can be a topic for conversation. But apparently, that's a big deal in Asia. So think about it from an OMS perspective for some of the next sessions.
Yeah,
we're right on time. Before I send you guys home, quickly from the audience, anybody have a quick question that we can pick their brains? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm closing it.
Awesome. It's great to
Guys,
see everyone.
All right.
thank you so
Great,
much.
Darko.
Great
Yeah,
job.
thanks for hosting, Darko. Great job.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you
Bye.
guys. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, guys. See you.
All right.
Bye.